Welcome to Dialysis Unfiltered, real talk about life on dialysis, transplant, and everything in between. Each week, we share honest stories, hard truths, and helpful tips from lived experiences. Just a heads up, we're not medical professionals. Everything shared here comes from our own journeys. This means to make sure to always check with your care team or doctors for actual medical advice or treatments. So, let's grab your seats, start your sessions, and let's plug in. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Dialysis Unfiltered. It's your boy Fizz, aka Jaime, and I have two hosts today with me. Nick, which was in episode 1. Welcome back, Nick. And
Hey, how's it going?
we have a new host, Amir, which he's a member of my dialysis Discord. Welcome, Amir.
Hey, how are y'all?
So today's episode, we're going to be talking basically about hemo dialysis versus PD and basically the pros and cons and everything in between. Basically, if you were told, hey, choose one, this episode is really going to cover it. But before we kind of jump into that, I want to talk about, what dialysis is. Because, if you're a new listener or you are a family member, listening to this podcast, I kind of want to give you a quick rundown of what dialysis is. In simple terms, dialysis is a treatment for people that have kidneys that don't work. Okay. You go either to a clinic or you do it at home. And what it does is that it takes all your blood out for hemo, and then it puts it into the machine, cleans it, puts it back in, and you're able to live for another day. For PD, liquid goes in, liquid comes out through a machine. Same thing. You get to live another day. So, if for any reason, while listening to this episode, you might have some questions, make sure to, note them down in the comment section in the videos. I know I have it enabled right now on Spotify, so we'll be able to, communicate with the audience through that manner or that way. So, to start the episode, we're going to start with talking about hemodialysis. I know me and Nick are well versed about this. I've been on hemo majorly my whole dialysis life, quote unquote, since I started, which is about 6 years. And Nick, how long have you been on hemo, or you did it?
So I did hemo for 4 months
4
after
months.
being on PD for, no, I'm sorry. I did hemo for 4 years
Gotcha.
after being on PD for 4 years.
Hmm.
And then I also had about 6 month time period when I was a teenager being on PD before I got my first transplant.
Gotcha. And for you, Amir, you haven't even started with it, right? You just straight to PD, right?
No, I'm hopeful that I can avoid hemodialysis until I get a transplant.
Gotcha. And we'll talk about reasons why about that later on in the episode. But to start off, I'm going to tell you guys about my story with hemo, okay? And how it works and all the stuff you want to know, basically. So, how it works. In order to do hemodialysis, you, of course, either have to do it in clinic, which means going to a center and, seeing nurses and having them stick you. But before you do that, you have to get something called either a fistula. Well, to begin, when you first get on hemo, you're given a chest catheter, right, Nick? You're getting a chest catheter for
Yeah.
emergency, quote unquote, dialysis at the hospital, and they stick it in a jugular. I think it is, Nick, a jugular vein that goes down and kind of gets near your heart.
It's one of your main arteries, yeah.
Yeah. And then they hook you up to a machine, and then the machine, what it does is that, like I said, it takes your blood out, pushes it through a dialyzer, right, Nick? That's what it's called, a dialyzer. And then it filters it, cleans it, and then it pushes it back into you, clean blood. Because since your kidneys are not working, well, you need a machine to do it for you now, and that's how you live. Right after you're out of the hospital and you're given a clinic to go to, usually it's either a DaVita or a Fresenius clinic. And I know there's some private clinics. I never went to a private clinic. I only went to Fresenius and DaVita. But once you're given a clinic to go to, you're going to be given a schedule too. You're going to either be Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, or you're going to be Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays. And depending on whatever your time slot, for me in the past, it was in the mornings. I preferred the mornings. I loved going at 5:30 in the morning and doing my time. And also about the time is that depending on either how bad you are, how much you weigh, and all those stuff, that's how long you're going to be on the machine for. The normal amount of time that people are on dialysis, I think it's 3 hours and 30 minutes. That's the standard, right, Nick? 3:30, I believe.
It's somewhere between 3.5 and 4, generally
Gotcha.
speaking.
Yeah.
It depends on the size, but yeah.
When I was bigger, like I told you guys before, I used to be 500 pounds. When I first started, I was on that motherfucker for 5 hours. So that was a long ass time to be in a clinic getting your blood fucking sucked out and getting it put back into you to get cleaned. But once you're giving your time, once you're giving your schedule, then you're going to be doing dialysis for about a month or two. And then they're going to start bringing up the fistula surgery. And I think that's like the biggest con about hemo, but we'll talk about that later. And what a fistula is that it's going to go into your arm. It's either going to go on the lower part of your arm by your wrists, or it's going to go a little bit above or like right in the middle below your biceps. I don't know what the hell is. That's what it's called, right? What spot is that? Lower bicep area. But
Well, it could go anywhere from your wrist all the way up to your shoulder on both sides.
oh
Actually,
damn, I didn't know. I never
yeah,
got it.
there's like 3 spots along that route on both arms that they could do, and then if need be, they can actually go into a femoral artery line and actually kind of do one in your leg. That's
Yeah.
crazy to me.
Yeah, no, I know that people. I know there was an older patient at my clinic that I used to go to. He had one in like in the inner thigh, and I thought that was fucking horrible. Like I could not imagine like getting those big old freaking, you know, needles stuck in there. That shit hurts. But anyways, once you get your fistula, you there's two. There's an artificial one, and then there's a organic one. The organic one is the one that your veins, and depending if either your veins are too small or too big, you're gonna have to get a graft, which is a artificial one. The procedure is very. It doesn't hurt. Well, when you get it doesn't hurt. They put me down under. And I literally went to sleep, woke up, I had a fistula. And what it basically is that they grab two veins and they combine them together. I think that's what they do, Nick. They put them together.
So they take a vein and they tee it into an artery, and over time, it's basically short circuiting the entire vascular system, and it basically takes the pressure that's from the artery and converts the vein, generically speaking, into a artery and beefs
Gotcha.
it up. And because it's near the surface, it's easier to stick.
Yep. So I don't know the technicalities of things, so I might be asking Nick a lot because he's more knowledgeable about these things. He's very, when something happens, he likes to dig in and find out the workouts or the workarounds or however it works, whatever. But for me, like I said, they told me it's just two veins combined together and then it works. That's how they get the blood out and then the blood in to be able to help you, live for another day. But there's also a graft, which is an artificial fistula, which basically means that if your veins are too small, usually that's the case, right, Nick? If your veins are too small, that they give you an artificial one.
Generally speaking, yeah. And there are some other options on that. They're called I might be a little bit wrong on the pronunciation and or exact term for it, but they call them. I think they're called like a superficial fistula, and basically it's once they've tried all spots on your body and there's nowhere else to go, they'll actually implant a a graft under your skin, sort of like a chemo port to an extent
Yeah.
nowadays, under the skin, and that would connect directly back into a main artery.
Yeah, it's like a little tube. Imagine it like a little
And it would
tube.
be it would be like where your CVC typically is, or
Yeah.
perm cath.
Yeah. So it's like it's a pretend vein for you guys, just simple terms. It's a plastic tube that they make some veins connect to, and then they stick that plastic tube, and that's how you get your treatment. Um, One thing that I found out later, which I would have fucking liked to know when I first started, was that a graft never really grows like an artificial one, or an organic one, whatever. Because I know my thing about getting a fistula was that through the years of being stuck in the same spots, which they're not supposed to. That's one big thing too, guys. Like if they're gonna stick you, make sure they go in a ladder pattern, and don't let them stick the same spot, because if they keep on sticking the same spot in that new fistula that you got, it's gonna create an aneurysm, and you're gonna know what an aneurysm or a vein that has an aneurysm looks like, because it's gonna bulge out of your, like, it's gonna be very noticeable. And that's where, like, a lot of people that do dialysis, that's how you know they're on dialysis, because their veins are like super bulgy. Like the ones that I had, they literally look like eggs under my skin, and that shit, it's not pleasing to look at. After a while you don't mind it because it's there and you understand that it's your lifeline and whatever. But if I was told, hey, if you get a graft, it's artificial or it's fake, and you're able to keep it, as long as you keep it clean on the outside and you don't get no infections, it can last you like 3 to 5 years before they have to swap it over, right, Nick? Like before they have to put a new one in, because I know those don't last forever. Those you
They
usually have to
don't.
wait.
Um, so here's a couple things. Truth is, so when it comes to a graft, if they don't follow the track method two on the graft, you'll because you're poking in the same spot continuously, you'll actually get a weak point,
Hmm.
and so that could be problematic too on that front. So it's extremely important that you sit here and do the track method, like no questions asked, regardless of the scenario.
Yeah.
Um, I will sit here and say, from what I've been told, and this checks out mathematically wise. If you do a fistula, you're less likely to have your body look at it as an infection.
Hmm.
When you start putting artificial things into it, it starts to, if you get an infection, and it develops into something like staph. Staph basically clings to anything artificial in the body because the body can't get rid of it. And so even if they give you the antibiotics for the staph infection, it'll never fully get rid of the staph that's on anything artificial in your body.
Oh wow.
So like if you've had something like a artificial uh, hip replacement or something like that, or you have any sorts of rods or screws or anything like that in your legs from like a break or whatnot, and you get a staph infection and it happens to get attached to that, with a graft being a part of your circulatory system with blood, it's gonna get attached to that, and that could make them have to pull it out even earlier,
Oh wow.
if you were to get an infection. So like there's some questionability there on like whether you should go one way or another on that front.
Gotcha. And also, I forgot to mention, when you first get your chest catheter, I think they have a time limit on how long they could have it on you. Now, I do know there's been patients, especially in our Discord, younger patients that did not want to get stuck in their fistulas because some people complain that it hurts. For me, I feel like the first couple of sessions, it was just like a sting. But after a while, honestly, guys, like I wasn't even able to freaking feel it anymore because of how scarred up like that area where they would stick me was, because of the continuous pokes that you would get. But the chest catheter, when you go to a clinic, they're gonna want to get rid of that shit ASAP. I think the longest they'll have have one is like 3 months, and then they're really gonna start pushing you to get a fistula or decide if you want to go on PD. But for me, I know it was like the second month I was in, and they were like, "Okay, well, what type of fistula are you gonna want to get since you want to come in clinic and to do your dialysis, which is hemo?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know, like I don't know. I just got told I got, you know, I need dialysis to live. What, I don't know the what to, the answer to give you guys." So they just gave me a regular organic fistula, and they just started sticking me. Now, the needles are intimidating. I'm gonna tell you guys this. They are
Ballpoint pen size. I
yeah,
can't do it.
yeah. They have different gauges, and gauge means basically how big it is. They start you off small, and it's bigger than the smallest ones are bigger than your like your regular needles that you get when you go draw blood, but they get big to like what is it, like 14 gauge, 13 gauge, and those the lower the number, the bigger they are. So remember that. So when you go to the clinic and they're like, oh, we're gonna stick them with a 17 gauge, it's not gonna be super big, but once you start going down to like 15, 14, 13, those suckers are big. And I'm not saying like straw big, but they're like, I mean, you'll know, you'll be like, holy moly, like these suckers are big,
Yeah,
But
I think 15 was about where a ballpoint pen size is, to put it
yeah,
in perspective.
exactly.
Because it
But
freaked me out.
yeah, no, exactly. No, when I first got stuck by one, I was like, is this gonna go through my arm, or like is what's gonna happen, But you need it. You got to think about it too, that whenever they stick you with these needles, it has to be big enough to draw like a load of blood out, like a bunch of blood, because the way, like I said before, the way the machine works is that it sucks the blood out, circles it through the dialyzers or through the little filters, whatever, and then it pumps it back into you. So imagine if you had a little needle sucking all that blood out of your body. What's the percentage? I forgot how many liters they suck out of you per treatment.
So so like they can't suck so much out of you because you're basically it's part of the circulatory system at that
Yeah,
point. But it's based on the math, it should be a pint every 1.2 minutes or 5 pints roughly every 6 minutes,
yeah,
which gets you in a typical dialysis session. Um, Supposedly your full body worth of blood would be filtered between 15 and 25 times on average,
yeah.
which is
And
what a normal human being does every day
yeah,
on with regular kidneys.
with
Put
regular
that in
kit, yep.
perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing it in 4 hours generally.
Yep. And the reason why you get your blood cleaned also is because a lot of times when people get on dialysis, their kidneys, since they don't work, they don't pee. So you accumulate liquid in your body. And when you start accumulating too much liquid, it starts, affecting you, and it starts making you swell up. And I'm telling you this, when you start swelling up and you start getting like water around your lungs, that shit does not feel good. So there's a whole reason why they do hemodialysis, or they do dialysis period, because if you start getting fucking fluid and your blood starts getting super toxic, you're just going to die. And that's what a lot of people, whenever they choose not to do dialysis, that's what's going to happen, is that your body starts swelling up, your body starts getting super toxic blood because it's not getting filtered, and it's just a slow and very horrible death if you don't get into hospice. But
You're basically drowning.
yeah, and it sucks because, like I told you guys in episode 1, if it, I went to the hospital and they told me, hey, if you would have came in a couple of days later, your body would have shut down, you would have been dead, because I didn't get to start dialysis when I should have, because I was unaware of it. But after that, going back to the process of dialysis, is that once the blood's cleaned and it goes back into you, and you're taking you also, when you do dialysis, you get liquid taken out, like I said. um you get liquid taken out, you get your blood cleaned, and whenever you start dialysis, whatever your weight is, they try to challenge it to see what your normal quote unquote dry weight. Your dry weight is what you weigh without no liquid on you, right, Nick? That's your base weight, whatever you're supposed to be at. And I know a lot of the
Kind of,
times,
yeah.
yeah. And I know also, whenever you something that you guys are gonna have to get used to is that you won't be able to drink whatever you guys want. They're gonna give you a 32-ounce limit per day. So if you think about it, that's two 16-ounce bottles or four 8-ounce bottles a day. That's all you can drink, and that's including whatever food. So like if you eat salads and like water for like lunch, you gotta take into account the water and stuff that's in the salad, along with whatever you're drinking. So a lot of the times, what I used to do is I would take like little 6-ounce bottles with my meals, because I knew if I was eating a salad or if I was eating something with a lot of fluid in it, that would also count towards my fluid weight. And if I had too much fluid weight on me, when I would go to dialysis, they would have to take more off of me. And that alone would also cause issues, which I'm going to go into also in a second. But Man, I feel like I'm losing track. There's just so much to talk about that I'm just like, holy shit, you know. But once you once you get your treatment done for the days, you know, you go home, you rest, you get, you know, you eat your meals, and you know, you live your life, right? And you only go 3 days a week, like I said, you know, depending on whatever, how many hours you're there for, 3 hours to 4 hours to 5 hours. And then, you know, like I said, you have a nurse there that you get to, they, you know, take you to your seat, you weigh in to see what your weight is for the day, so they know how much to take off of you, fluid and stuff like that. And then you go to your chair, you sit down. The nurse is going to be there to stick you. They stick you. They, you know, they get you ready. You sit there for your hours, and you're done for the day. Once your treatment's done, you go home. Like I said, I think I said it twice now. But then there's also um, home hemodialysis, which is the whole same process what you do in clinic, except you do it yourself. Now, I know some people would rather be at their house being comfortable doing dialysis by themselves, but me personally, I did not trust myself. I couldn't stick myself, so I chose in clinic. There's pros and cons to each. I know for a lot of people, sometimes they don't like in center because they don't like the nurses there, but me personally, all my nurses were lovely. I never had any issues. I enjoyed my experience, and I'm pro hemo. I don't like PD, but we'll talk about PD later. Uh, but you know, besides that, I think, you know, the cons about it, I'm trying to think right now, is, well, let me start with the pros before I continue on. The pros, you're gonna have a nurse, you're gonna have a medical team looking after you if something, you know, if shit hits the fan. There's no daily responsibilities like PD, and it's a routine. Meaning you go there Monday, Wednesday, Fridays from a certain time. You go get your shit done. You go home. You get the next day off. Medical supervision. You don't have to worry about anything going wrong. You have a medical trained team on site. If anything ever happens to you, like your blood pressure drops, that shit sucks. When your blood pressure drops while you're on dialysis, that shit fucking sucks. I'll tell you that. And um, for daily responsibilities, well, you don't have any. You don't have to have your house full of products. You don't have to have your house, you know, be a clinic. That, I think that was another reason why I didn't like PD, was because I didn't want to make my house feel like it was a hospital or a place of medical care for me. Like, home is home for me. Home is like a safe space. I don't want to make my safe space into a medical place. So that was another reason why. And for cons, of course, it's time consuming, but not as time consuming as PD. But we'll talk about that later, like I said 1,000 times. Post treatment crashes. If they take off too much fluid, meaning that if you go in, let's say, weighing 100 pounds, right? They take off 5 pounds, 10 pounds in one treatment. You get home, or you're going to your car and you start feeling like you're about to pass out because they've taken too much off. You crash. That's a big one. My thing for that would be that if you feel like you're not feeling right, sit your ass there until you start feeling good. Tell them to give you some water, get your fluid up, and, you know, deal with it.
Yeah,
And
they also won't let you leave if your blood pressure's too low, and that
yeah,
typically there's a correlation there too.
yeah, they won't even let you leave. They'll keep on checking your blood pressure and making sure that you're right before they make you leave. And also, I know another thing would be the fear of needles. I think that's another whole reason why some people don't do hemo, because you do deal with needles and big ones, like I said. And just some people don't want to fuck with that, you know. I personally didn't fucking care. I was just like, whatever, it's needles. Oh, big whoop, right? But then there's the other thing about travel issues. So I traveled on hemo. I never had any issues because I always planned it well. Meaning that if I knew I was going to go somewhere, I always planned it at least a month or two before. And whenever you plan for hemo treatments when you're traveling, you have to, you know, talk to your clinic, let them know, hey, you know, I'm traveling to whatever place, you know. They'll find you a clinic there, make you a time slot for a chair there so you can get treatment. and then you just show up to this clinic there like you would at your home, and you get your treatment and you're done. That's it, you know. Um, but besides that, I'm trying to think of what else other things that we could talk about. You got anything you want to say about hemo, Nick? Since you were on it too.
Well, I mean, I want to clarify. I never got a fistula. I never got a graft. I had a CVC permcath port for 4 years,
You were
and
one of
they
those
were
people.
they were bent. They were bent on getting me into a fistula or a graft, and I was like, nah. Like, I mean, to put it in perspective, I was waiting on the transplant list for over 2.5 years with over 64 phone calls. So,
Oh
like,
wow.
in realisticness, I had a point to the madness, a little bit.
Yeah.
It could have happened at any point in time.
Now we're.
However,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no.
Well, I was gonna
Well, I
tell
mean,
you
so
because
yeah.
I was gonna say when you mentioned your chest catheter, and you kept it there because you never got a fistula. Did you feel like the clinic staff is like being real picky against you? Like, hey, get one, get one, get one. You got to get one, or else you're gonna get infected, or would they throw that type of stuff at you?
So not necessarily clinic staff. So my techs at the time, they knew far less than me because I mean they only have 500 hours worth of training. Let's be honest. That is actually standard across the board for Fresenius and DaVita. Um, and my nurse, technically speaking, is the one that had to sit here and hook me up. So I felt more safe with a nurse hooking me up because of a chest cath. Compared to techs having to sit here and do your fistulas and grafts. I was like, nah, if somebody with 500 hours is going to stab me, say, nah,
Oh
ain't
yeah,
happening.
I forgot about
Yeah,
that. The fucking
I'm not doing that.
infiltrations. Oh hell no, the infiltrations. Yeah, that's another thing about
And
hemo. Holy god.
yeah, I've seen that enough that it spooked me enough. I'm good. Um, with that being said, the I didn't particularly like my nurse either, so even then, like sometimes the techs would kind of get away with it while the nurse observed. Um, I mean, sure, in a 4 year span, I may have had like 5 staph infections, which doesn't sound like a lot. I just want to clarify that's like one a year. Um, they would have to pull it out. They'd have to wait a day with antibiotics, like 2 or 3 days in the hospital to clear out the staph infection, and then go back into surgery and place you a new line because you don't want the staph to stick to the catheter. And I've done that plenty of times. And sometimes it would just spawn out of nowhere, kind of situation. There was no correlation to it, at least not for me.
Gotcha.
And it was made even harder because I couldn't use latex or Tegaderm tapes, and so like, which to an extent, there's evidence that states that having not it open to free air, but having it under something that's more breathable, so it won't sweat and produce moisture. There is evidence to say that that might be a better option.
Hmm.
And generally speaking, with any sort of wound healing, that's a general rule is like covered, but enough where it can get air. Because like that's gonna help it heal.
Hmm.
Um, has been shown and proven that there's a correlation there too. Um, I've gone in before because they wouldn't sit here and like change out a catheter that was slowly falling out and force their hand. I didn't really get a lot of flack from the actual staff of the clinic. They saw where my headspace was at, and they left me alone.
Hmm.
But my doctors were a different story. I had one doctor in particular. Every month she would walk in. She was like, "So you gonna sit here and get a fistula?" And I'm like, "No. Where is this information coming from?" And I even went and got vein mapped and then backed out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if that puts it in any perspective, like I was in the midst of vein mapping, I was so mad about having to get a fistula and me being so young and me not, being in a relationship or anything like that. I was like, this is gonna mess up my life and everything else like that. And so I was just so bent about not getting one that a good friend of mine who's a nurse sit here and told me, she was like, you don't have to get one. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, like you have to physically decide that on your own
Mm-hmm.
and okay them to do it. They can't just do it. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, but
So
I
I could
feel
sit here
like,
and just continue
uh,
this. And she was
yeah,
like, yeah, okay.
I feel like they push it so hard onto you. Like I literally felt like if I didn't get one, they weren't gonna like give me treatment no more. That's how I felt,
Because
you know.
because the risk is like tenfold for an infection, allegedly,
Yeah.
allegedly,
They would always bring that
allegedly.
shit up. They'd be like, if you don't get one, you're gonna get infected, and your heart's gonna get fucking infected. You're gonna die. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, okay, hello.
I mean, it can happen if you're not on top of it and you just sit here and write it off as like a cough or like not feeling great or something, and you wait a week. That staph infection can kill you in 5 days flat. It's like sepsis.
Yeah, no,
It's
you
not a
don't.
fun time.
Yeah, you don't want that shit. Yeah, most definitely. But there's so many things to like talk about hemodialysis. I feel like I covered a lot of. I mean, some of it a lot. 60%, 70%. But there is also a lot of like little things that we might miss. But if you guys ever have any questions, just leave it in the comments in the videos, and we'll get back to you about it. Or you can join our community, the Dialy Discord server, Dialycord, and we're always in here trying to help people out and answer any type of questions. So keep that in mind too. But now that we talked about hemodialysis and what's it about, or at least I talked about it, and you kind of gave your input to about it, we need to move on to PD, or peritoneal dialysis. And Amir, if you want to kind of let us know how it works, and the types, the machines, and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. So to start, I'm going to go with the types and then into how it works. How it works applies to both types. So there is a type called CAPD, continuous ambulatory PD, which is going to be you're on the machine. So it's continuously going. It's called a cycler, and it hooks up to the catheter that you will have surgically inputted in you. No matter which mode you choose, you will have a catheter surgically input in you. It's a very quick surgery, outpatient surgery. They put you under, and within like 45 minutes, you're in the recovery room with a new cool plastic tube sticking out of your belly.
Yep.
The ambulatory PD, on the other hand, is not going to use a machine, and it's typically, I mean, not typically, it is done while you're awake. You'll put the bag on a hook on a door or something, or on an IV pool, and let it go into you. And then when you go to drain, the bag that you use for that actually has a drain bag attached too. So you'll hook up, drain into that bag, and then fill with the new bag. And it's just a cycle of that. They prescribe everything to you, from the times, the fluid strength, and how many times you do exchanges either way. So you won't have to worry about managing that so much. But how it works specifically is you'll hook your catheter up to whatever mode, so your cycler or your manual bags. I actually personally have a mixture of both in my prescription. Once you're hooked up, if you have fluid inside of you, you'll drain. So once you're done draining, after that, you'll have new fluid come in, and it'll sit there, and it sits on your peritoneal cavity, and it uses that cavity to actually filter the blood. So it pulls the toxins through the cavity and also fluid. And then once you drain, it removes those toxins and fluid.
So
So that's just continuous cycles.
before you continue, Amir, can you tell the people what a peritoneal cavity is, or where it's around, or kind of let people know so they kind of.
So the peritoneal cavity itself is, if you were to look at like the bottom half of your torso, there is a cavity in there that contains like your intestines and all those good organs, and it uses the lining of that area to filter your blood.
Okay.
But so, like I said, both of those do the same thing. Just it's going to be depending on how you do the PD. PD is done completely at home for the most part. There are some odd cases where they'll have you come to the clinic and do it. I wouldn't suggest that, since part of the whole reason you'll choose PD, which we'll get into pros and cons more in a little bit here, is going to be that you do it at home. Your doctor will tell you, oh, this will let you live your life. It'll let you continue on. I will tell you, that's not necessarily true. Uh, Neither dialysis mode really does let you continue your life as it was before. Just for a little background, I was a plumber, physical job. Once this happened, you can't necessarily keep up with that. It's not your fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just the way the cards are thrown.
Yep.
But basically, like the machine while you're asleep, the manuals while you're awake is the main thing to know the difference between the continuous and the regular ambulatory PD. Now the pros, like I said, they're done at home, so it's awesome. Even with the manuals, once you fill it, no matter your dwell is like 2 hours, which as well as the amount of time the fluid sits inside you. It could be like 2 hours, 3 hours. Some people have icodextrin, which is another type of fluid. They'll have it dwell all day, and then drain it off on their machine at night. Um, and then the manuals can go anywhere from 2 every couple of days if you still have a lot of kidney function to 5 a day. It really just depends on your prescription, your kidney function, anything like that. They'll say residual function is always best for PD, but there are people with no kidneys, especially in our community, that have PD and it works fine for them. More freedom, even though I said it does not let you live your life how it used to be, you do have a lot more freedom when it comes to PD. Like, yes, you're doing it every day, but the freedom comes to things in like the diet. Your liquid restriction is a lot less if you have one at all. I personally do not have one. I do limit myself a little bit. Like if I see my feet start to like not be visible, I guess is the best way to say it. Like you see the bones in your feet. If I see that start to go away, I stop drinking fluid
Mm-hmm.
for the day. That's not very often at all because I drain about 2.5 liters of fluid a night.
Now that also
Uh,
depends on if like you still pee, right, Amir? Like if you pee or you know
yeah, I would
the
say it can. My urine function has been roughly the same since I started PD a year and a half ago. If you don't pee, you still may have a fluid restriction depending on how much we remove every day. Even if you're not assigned one, it's probably better to have one. Even though there are different strengths, especially if you're using the cycler, that you can just switch to in case of fluid overloads or swelling or whatever. It's best to not get to that because once you get to the red bags, which are the highest strength bags of solution you can put on the cycler, it actually damages the catheter more than a normal bag because of the concentration of solution.
mm,
So if you want your catheter to last, the best bet is to stick with the yellow bags, which are the lightest, or the green bags, which are the middle. Like so, it's like a 2.5% solution. I think the yellow is 1.25%.
okay.
The biggest thing the doctor will tell you though about PD, and especially if you're young, why you should pick PD over hemo is how gentle it is on the body in comparison to hemo. Hemo just puts a lot of strain on your body since it's filtering rather quickly and you're doing it in shorter sessions that are less frequent. While PD, especially if you're on the cycler, it's at minimum 8 hours on the cycler every day. You sleep through it, so your body is also recovering while you're on PD for the most part. So if you're young, they will push this for you as much as they can because it is better for your body in the long run, especially if you don't know when you're going to get a transplant. There are some cons, obviously. Peritonitis is a big one. If you are not cleanly when you hook up to the machine or when you're doing your exchanges, you can get an infection in your peritoneal cavity called peritonitis. And at that point, if you catch it early enough, you won't be hospitalized for the most part. They'll give you antibiotics to stick in your bag, and it'll help pretty much right away. But if you don't catch it early enough, you can be hospitalized, and it can remove the ability to do PD because it will destroy the peritoneal cavity. It's also from anyone who's had it, they said it's the worst pain they've ever had. So that's just a forewarning.
Yep.
I will say it's not hard to avoid, but it's hard to avoid the coincidental things that can cause it. If that makes sense. So, like, let's say you're hooking up to the machine, you wash your hands, wear the mask, sanitized everything, the whole 9 yards. If a random hair falls from God's green earth on the ceiling or wherever, and it lands on your catheter, and then that travels, you can get peritonitis from that. That's like a 0.0005% chance of anything happening like that. But it can. And we actually have someone in the Discord, our community, who got a peritoneal infection from what they believe to be the solution, which is a Baxter based solution, from what I
Oh
understand, that was
yeah,
shipped
I
from
heard
out
about
of
that.
country.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so they're still dealing with the I can't remember the name of the hurricane, but what the hurricane caused in their warehouses. So they
Yep.
shipped the solution from out of the country, and apparently that's where the infection is seeming to have come from.
Jeez.
Mm-mm.
So most of the time, the infections are something you can stop personally. There's also infections around the catheter site you can get. Um, those are a little bit more common. There's someone in the Discord who has had it like 2 times before she got a transplant. Essentially, you have to take care of the catheter as well, whether you're sweating, if it got wet from like the rain or something after every shower. Basically, anytime that you would clean your body, you have to clean that catheter. And there's a very specific way to do it. It's not hard, doesn't take more than a couple minutes. You'll dry it off with these. There's at least my dialysis company sends me washcloths that are disposable. So you'll use one of those, dry it off, clean it with some skin safe bleach, dry it off again just to make sure the bandage will adhere. And my company has me put antibiotic cream underneath the bandage. Some don't. Some don't even have you put a bandage under the catheter. It's all instructions your dialysis nurse will give you, and that's it. You take care of it like that. All is Gucci when it comes to that. I've personally never had an issue with it. It sometimes looks like it, but I'm also not the traditional white patient they would take pictures with when it comes to catheter. So if I look at that, I'm like, oh, my catheter doesn't look like that because my scars don't look the same way.
Yeah.
So if your body is not a traditional picture body that they use in like healthcare books, don't necessarily worry about things like that. Just if it looks different from your normal, that's when you worry about it.
Yep. And
Daily responsibility. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. Finish.
I'd say the daily responsibility, a lot of people overplay the daily responsibility. There are a few people I've talked to that are like, oh, I can't really be responsible for everything. Um, it's 20 minutes a day. If you're on the cycler, which most people will be on the cycler, um, 20 minutes a day. The only real parts where you have to worry about is when you're hooking the bag up to the machine and when you're hooking yourself up to the machine. And then the cleaning your catheter, you're going to clean yourself anyway, so you're adding 2 minutes to your cleaning routine. But does it suck to have a little bit more responsibility? Yes. But is it worth it? I think so. Some people may not, and that is their cup of tea. But for what this does for me, I do think it's the best way.
And you were literally just hooking yourself up right before we started this episode today, too. That's how quick it was done.
Yeah, I was on the Discord call with you while I was hooking up too. All you got to do is wear the mask. You can put your headphones on over it, whatever you need to do. I mean, half the time I'm waiting for my catheter to soak before I hook up. I'm watching YouTube shorts or playing a game on my phone. So it's really, I hate to say that with both of these, it's going to consume your time, but it is. It sucks. It's reality. You got to choose which one you want to do. This one allows me to be with my family while I'm doing my dialysis. At home hemo will too, but in home or not in home, in clinic will not. And if you're young, in clinic is going to suck a little bit more for you because you're going to be surrounded by the typical dialysis patient, which isn't us. The
Yep.
last kind of negative point about peritoneal dialysis, and this will actually apply to home hemo too, is how much stuff you have to have in your home.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you choose to do a home modality, just you'll have like a corner of a room and a closet full of stuff. So I wouldn't recommend keeping it in your bedroom if you choose this, because then yes, you feel like you're in a hospital. It sucks.
Or
But
if you have a small house, a 1 bedroom house, your whole it's probably gonna take up 50% of your place.
yeah, if you're living in like a studio or something, definitely don't recommend this.
I've done that.
If you
I've
have
done
an
that.
office, it can fit in the corner of your office. It might collapse on you. You just be careful. Um, but in general, storage space does suck a little bit. But if you have a family or if you just prefer being home, this is the way to do it because the storage space is nothing compared to that sense of security you get.
I feel like one of the things that also sucked was like carrying around those heavy ass boxes. Like once
Oh yeah,
Baxter or they delivered them to your place, some of them were nice enough, like the delivery drivers, to like take them into your home, right? And they were awesome, but some of them would leave your shit literally outside your door. And that happened to actually one of our members. They lived like on the third floor, and they left their shit outside for them to get it. So can you imagine how horrible that would have been? Carrying all that stuff up one by one.
I will say, if you want to choose a home modality, the best bet is to see who's your dialysis supplier near you if you can. Because I have Fresenius, and they are awesome with the deliveries. The dude comes once a month. He has this cool dolly that lifts itself up the stairs, and he brings my solution upstairs, puts it in the room. Sometimes they make it almost inaccessible to get in that room, but that's another thing. I don't worry with it too much. But Fresenius is awesome for the delivery. Yes, I have heard a lot of stuff about Baxter being bad, though.
Yeah, no, I had Baxter, and it was an experience, but that's a whole nother thing for me about PD. But besides that, do you want to give a quick rundown of how PD connecting works, like the stuff involved, so they can kind of have an idea?
Yeah, for sure. So with my it's going to be different depending on your nurse. I will say that I've experienced that firsthand. We had nurses from other clinics visiting all the time during my training, and each one had a different method. The way that it has come down to for me is I will wash my hands and sanitize them. You would think you wear gloves. I don't wear gloves. I haven't worn gloves for the year and a half I've done this. There's a little caddy in the front of my machine, and it has the dirty tip, a clean tip, and the tip to the patient line. I'll stick my catheter tip into the dirty one, grab a little cloth, I guess is the best way, or like a gauze pad, and soak it in the bleach that is not safe for skin. It's specifically for the catheter. And then I'll wrap that cloth around my catheter end and hold it there for about 2 minutes. Once that's done, I just take that off, take the cap off of the patient line, unscrew my catheter, and screw it onto the patient line, and it's done. 2 minutes, and that's it.
Okay. So, and also, do you have to? I remember for me, I had to heat up the bags, right? Like you have to put them on a heating pad or something like that. Do you have to do that?
For the machine, no. So the machine actually has a heating tray on top of it that
Oh,
will heat up the bags. I typically don't wait, but once you put it on there, if you could set the machine up, I believe it's like 12 hours in advance if you want, and it'll be warm. But at this point, I'm used to the cold solution, so even the manual ones I do cold. Um, if you're doing manuals, like you said, they give you a heating pad normally that you wrap it in, and it
mm-hmm.
takes forever to heat it up. But it will heat up the solution, and then it feels better going in, especially if you're fresh to hemo or not hemo PD. If you're not fresh, it doesn't really feel as bad. But when you are fresh, it sucks. The cold solution really sucks. And also another thing I didn't actually mention that I just thought of, the machine itself primes the lines. If it doesn't prime it right, it will have air bubbles in it, and those air bubbles will feel like you have air trapped in you from surgery. It is
Okay.
one of the single most awful experiences. But with the machine, at least, you have the option to hit prime again if you notice that it did not finish priming all the way. Manual, you have to prime it too, but that's all. Basically, the thing that's on the front of the machine can also be used for the manual bags, and it will tell you to drain, to prime, and to fill and drain again, or not drain, and to fill and disconnect on that thing too. So there's different steps to it.
Gotcha. And what about you, Nick? How was your PD? If you want to give your input about all that stuff, like Amir did.
Um, Generally the same. So like obviously I had two separate times, about 7 years apart that I sit here and did mine. One for quite a bit longer than the other one. Um, I would sit here and say the only two things that I could sit here and say from experience, at least the first time around, that really, I guess, freaked me out or added some craziness to the mix was I have had my. So I got home late and I ran 12-hour shifts on my cycler at the time because I was a very little person back in that time period before my first transplant, and I was in high school, and I was running late that night to get hooked up, and I sit here and I was asked to specifically to sit here and I was like, well, I need to get on my machine and whatnot, and so I sit here and asked my father because he had went through training with me to sit here and set up my machine for me while I sit here and took a shower and whatnot. And so when I got back out of the shower and whatnot, everything looked right. I checked it over and whatnot. I hooked up and I go, well, that's weird. Like it's saying prime patient line. I hit go anyway, and I got an entire line of air placed into me. It was like at that point in time, the lines were like 25 feet long.
Yeah, they did
I
shit.
have never lived in pain so bad in my entire life.
Jeez.
And you could feel the air, and it was a lot of air, slowly travel up your back, into
Oh,
your shoulders, into your neck, and up through like the upper spine into your like head over 3 weeks is how
you're gonna
long it took for
you're
it to
gonna
travel.
make people not want to do PD just from you telling them this. You're gonna be like, hell
No,
no.
like I mean, like I had a great time doing PD. Like the thing is, like at the same time, PD doesn't require blood, so like that's already a positive in my book. So like you're less likely to like something to go
Bleed
wrong.
out.
A needle, yeah,
Bleed
like
out to death.
generally bleed out. Yeah. So like my thing is like I don't want to like you messing with things that shouldn't be messed with, and like sugar water, sure, okay. Um, the only other thing that I had was so when on your transfer set is what it's called. You have the plastic tube that comes out of your stomach. Um, and then they have a transfer set connected to that. That's like another like 6 inches, generally speaking. Could be longer, could be shorter, but 6 inches. And that is screwed together with a piece made of titanium. Okay, that screw can get loose, technically speaking. Okay, they may have improved it since then, but when I was going through this the first time around, it was just two pieces that literally screw together, and they're both slick as glass. So like you have to have as much friction as possible to like really tighten them jokers up, and you don't want to take tools to it. So they had tightened it up on the operating table. I had been doing dialysis PD for like God knows how long at that point, at least a couple months, and they sit here and tell you if the transfer set ever falls off, never, and I mean never, put your thumb over the end of the tube. Okay. Very important information. Okay. Because if you do, that is an infection to the peritoneum. You will get peritonitis. And I go, okay, that makes perfect sense. Also, it's extremely important that you carry around one of the plastic clamps with you everywhere you go. For if this ever does happen to you, you may clamp this tube, okay, and then clamp it far enough up where they can actually still clean the tube and like disinfect it again if they need to. Okay, so you don't get peritonitis. Um, and I was like, okay, sounds good. I had a very responsive team when I was going through it the first time. That was third party, and I sit here and got out of the shower one day, was wiping off my transfer set and whatnot, and all of a sudden the damn thing hits the floor. And I
Jeez.
go, oh shit, okay.
Uh-oh.
And it starts pouring out dialysate solution, which is a good thing.
At least it
Okay,
ain't not
mind you,
blood. You know,
that's
it's not blood.
that's that's a good thing. Okay, in this certain scenario, and the first thing you do when you see a water hose pouring water out of it is you what? Put your finger over the top over the hole, sit
Oh,
here and stop it.
no.
That is what I did, and then as soon as I did it, I go, oh shit, and let go. Okay, so I'm now leaking. And I run naked into my room. Okay, I don't care at this point. You'll learn as you progress through this lifestyle. Pride gets thrown out the window. I ran into my room and I sit here and pulled out one of those clamps and clamped it and stopped the water. So like as long as there's water coming out, that means nothing's going in. So that's a vast improvement on the situation. Um, and so I clamped it, and then I took an entire roll of I think it was like silk tape at the time, and like wrapped an entire roll of silk tape around it so it would not unlock. I was freaked out so bad. And still standing naked because don't give two craps at this point in time. I sit here and I call my nurse on the phone and I sit here and I was like, hey, this is what's going on. And she was like, so calm, nonchalant. It's like she had just finished dinner and she was like relaxing drinking a coffee and like reading a book. She was like so calm about it. She was like, "Oh, okay, that's fine. Um, just come in tomorrow morning. I see you here. I plan to see you here in the morning, and we'll get it cleaned up for you and get a new transfer set put back on it." And I'm like, "What?" She was like, "Yeah." I was like, "What do I need to do tonight?" She was like, "Well, what did you do?" I was like, "I clamped it like you told me to with a plastic clamp, wrapped that entire roll of tape around it so it would not open." She was like, "Okay." And I was like, "I just lay in bed and sleep like a normal human being tonight on this?" And she was like, "Yeah, that sounds great. I'll see you tomorrow." And hung
What?
up. And I was like, left here like, what?
It's like, I don't feel right about this, but okay.
Yeah. But I did sleep on my stomach the other night. I was like, whoo, some great sleep going on there.
Did you leak anymore, or was there?
No, I had that Joker clamp, bro. It ain't leaking.
Hey, if you twist and turning, I was just saying,
No, I had a whole roll of tape wrapped around it. We got there to unwrap it the next day, and she's like, she literally took like 5 or 10 minutes unwrapping it. She's like, "My God, how much tape did you wrap around this?"
You mummified yourself, literally.
I really did, but I was so scared in the moment. Like I was just trying to sit here and make sure it did not come unclamped again.
Gotcha. Well, now that we're talking about personal experiences with it, I guess, Nick kind of shared his. What about you, Amir? Do you have any
Horror
anything,
stories.
any horror stories, or you know things that you never
Uh,
expected after you started PD that you wish you would have been told, or anything like that that you kind of feel you could let the audience know before they decide maybe doing it too?
Yeah, so before I get into the funny stuff, I'm going to say the one thing I wish they had always told me, which I didn't come across my research either, is you can't swim. You can't take a bath with this catheter, only showers. It really sucks. Some people will tell you to put Tegaderm on it or an ostomy bag.
Yep.
Some people say don't do that. It's really up to you if you do that or not. The doctor's probably going to tell you no. But if the doctor tells you no and you do it, don't tell the doctor. Unless you have to. If you get infected, then yeah, tell the doctor. But if you didn't, then don't. Right? Don't ask, don't tell. My funniest story with PD, it doesn't involve almost losing all of my PD fluid everywhere, thank God. It has to do with the fact that I love to go different places with my PD machine. It sucks to carry it around, it sucks to carry all the solution, but it does let me go whenever I want without telling my clinic and going through a whole bunch of stuff. So I decided to go hang out with a bunch of friends. I do partake in a little bit of the devil's lettuce sometimes, and I do drink a little bit sometimes. Don't tell anyone. Um, so there's a good group of us, and we're hanging out. I'm sipping on stuff and taking stuff I shouldn't. Um, and then it's bedtime. So I set up my machine. I was originally going to sleep in the guest bedroom. Their house was old, so the outlets didn't have the third prong, so I couldn't, which means I had to sleep in their living room. The patient lines on these machines, for reference, are now about 20 feet. They definitely made them shorter since Nick was on, but they made them shorter since I was on too. It sucks. But I set up the machine, get hooked up, everything. Little bit drunk, little bit everything. About to go to sleep, and I suddenly have to poop so bad.
God.
And I'm like, okay, I didn't expect this to happen. Probably shouldn't have eaten drunk Taco Bell.
Uh-oh.
I'm trying so hard to figure out how I'm gonna get to the bathroom. So first, I like try to run up the stairs and get to the bathroom. The cord is just too short by like 4 feet. So then
Oh,
I'm like, I had my machine on a little like fold out dinner table. So I'm waddling it back and forth because you're not supposed to lift very hard when you're on PD, at least when you have fluid in you. So I'm trying not to pick it up, trying not to unplug it. And finally, I just say, fuck it, rip the plug out of the wall, lift the machine up as high as I can, and carry the bitch up the stairs, sat it on the floor, and went to the bathroom. And it was the most relieving thing because I thought I was going to shit myself in my friend's house.
jeez, that would have been a interesting thing to wake up to. Is like, what's up with all this? Oh no,
Oh. Whew.
that's crazy.
So
No,
Yeah.
yeah, try and make sure you're near a bathroom if you're on the machine.
man.
Yeah, that was my rule too when I was doing PD. Was like I wanted to place my unit centralized so I could go to the bathroom and go to the kitchen and like still get around my room and stuff like that. And so like I was able to do that. Not everybody has that ability.
Mm-hmm. No,
Thankfully, Fresenius actually gave me a cart to put mine on too, so at
man,
home I can just roll it.
I didn't get a car. I had to buy my own from Baxter. Baxter was like, "Here's the device. You figure it out." Oh well. But see, it's funny you guys have these experiences because I'm able to kind of talk about both for hemo and PD. PD for me, the worst was peritonitis. I got that shit 3 times. I don't want people thinking that I'm a nasty person, but I'm telling you, the reason why I got it was because I wasn't pooping. Now, everybody in the Discord knows me for this. If you're not pooping at least once or twice every day on PD, you're going to have a bad time. Now,
Yeah.
if you get the reason why you get have a bad time if you don't poop on PD is because you get backed up and you start leaking bile inside your stomach, inside your PD area, and you get peritonitis, and that shit sucks. It's the worst fucking feeling in the world. I know Amir talked about it, but it's literally the worst fucking pain I've ever felt. I felt like there was somebody inside my stomach ripping my stomach from the inside out with like a sharp, hot knife. It did not feel fun. It wasn't. I do not recommend. So if you can take something from this, if you're on PD, make sure you're pooping. But for hemo, honestly, I never really had a bad experience with hemo. Um, I think the worst time was literally I was in clinic. One of the nurses stuck me, and she thought that I forgot what she said. Like my fistula blew out, and I wouldn't stop bleeding. So they called an ambulance. That like I was like literally thinking, oh shit, this is it. If my fistula blew out, I'm dead. That's literally because if you guys imagine, it's a big old vein, and if it pops, there ain't no stopping it. You're done. That's why people on dialysis or on hemo, you got to be real careful about your sight and what you're doing because if you're around sharp objects or you stab yourself somehow or you run into something and it goes boom pop, you're probably gonna be dead. So I was already freaking out, and the nurses like literally they were like, I need help, I think his vein blew. All the nurses in the clinic rushed over to me and they were all putting pressure on my fistula, and I felt like I was about to pass out. I was like, am I gonna die? Is this it? But eventually I guess it wasn't a blown out fistula because once I got to the hospital, the doctor unwrapped the fistula because it literally looked like they put down like so much shit around it to keep it from like bleeding that he released it, and I was like, oh shit, it's about to like freaking squirt blood all over the place and I'm gonna bleed out, right? But I was like, well, at least I'm at the hospital, so if I do bleed out they hopefully can help me out and not cause me to die, right? But he unwrapped my whole arm or my upper arm, my bicep area, and it wasn't bleeding anymore. So I was like, well, what the heck happened? I was like, she was over here freaking out that she said that my fistula popped. I'm like, what's up? I was just like, well, I guess she was just incorrect. And that's honestly like the only kind of experience that I remember that was kind of weird for me for hemo, but for PD, it definitely that was like the worst one. I do not recommend ever getting peritonitis if you can avoid it, by pooping, make sure you poop. But
So
And if you have trouble, your doctor will give you the most disgusting laxative you've ever
oh
had.
yeah,
In
no,
case
they
you
will. Yeah, they will. They're gonna make sure you shit. I'm telling you.
so
It-
I have a really funny story about this, and this is from clinic when it was still third party in my early days of PD before it switched over to Davita. I was they put all the patients in rooms, and the walls were thin in this clinic. Let's be honest here. It's about like hemo. Oh, like well, technically I could take you in the back after your hemo session. We could have this conversation, but instead we're gonna do it on the floor. Like technically it is against HIPAA to do it on the floor, mind you. But so you're in PD, they got these thin walls and whatnot, and I'm sitting here waiting for the doctor to come in and us do our little clinical visit every month. and I can hear the next patient, like one room over, like they're sitting here talking to them. I don't know who it is, and I, I was kind of like laughing myself about it in the room, because I think it was a she sat here and said, um, yeah, I haven't pooped in like a couple days. And I'm like, oh, okay, like this is serious information, you know? Like, I'm like, y'all, I'm like, okay, like she hasn't pooped in a couple days. It's like problematic, like,
Mm-hmm.
because, like the bowels will obstruct. And then, like, if
Mm-hmm.
your peritoneal dialysis catheter is kind of like tied up into those, like, now it doesn't function in or out and all these other sorts of things. She was like, Doc, like, I've drank Miralax 3 times a day. I'm like,
Shit.
that's a lot for you not to be pooping right now. And so, and the doctor starts laughing because he sits here and says, Miralax is more of like a stool softener, not an agitator. Okay. So there's
Yeah.
two different kinds of like stool related medications. One to soften said stool, and one to agitate your bowels for them to move. Okay. Okay. Coffee is a good agitator, to put it in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Softener, Miralax is. Okay. So he was like, he was kind of like, I was dying, in the other room, but he was like, he kind of like laughed about it. And he sits here and says, "You just need an agitator. I'll prescribe you one. That's fine." And they took care of it. But when I tell y'all, I was dying. They probably had to have heard me in the other room, listening to this entire conversation. Uh, it was a good time in that current moment.
It's like they're about to have a fun time once they get home and they can take that
Oh,
agitator.
100%. It's going to release like the rivers of America.
Yeah, yeah. They're gonna be like, "Dang, this Miralax working now." But also, I mean, leading into another conversation about like choosing what's right for you. Like, how did you guys, decide what was right for you when you were choosing PD between, or like I said, between PD and hemo? You can give me your input, Nick, first.
Okay. So when I was 13 and went on dialysis, um, the closest clinic that would accept pediatric patients was about an hour, hour and a half away from me at my hospital that I was at. The local dialysis clinic in my hometown would not take me because I was under the age of 18. Um, so my doctors specifically, they were like, like this is problematic because they're doing all the like logistics on the back end of it. And they said you'd have to be up here like 3 times a week. And like my dad had to sit here and like put his job on hold to sit here and take me 2 hours to sit here and get dialysis and then 2 hours back home on top of like a 4 hour session. And that's not
Mm-hmm.
including hook up and unhook time. So like you're talking at least like 4.5 hours probably at that point, and then you're gonna have to eat dinner. It's a whole day at this point,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going at like peak times of the day, so you're fighting traffic, and that's why it's taking longer. And they sit here and said, we don't typically say this, for kids your age, because like they can't handle the responsibility, they're not mature enough for it.
Mm-hmm.
But we really think peritoneal dialysis would be a good fit for you because like you're fairly clean, you're fairly legit, like logistics wise, analytical. um like you can we think you can do this, like you have a good head on your shoulders kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
going on
Yeah.
for a kid at 13. And I was like, do I have to stick myself with needles? That's the first question, because the video they showed me
Yeah.
was like hemo. So I thought everything had to do with blood, and so I'm like, oh my god, like I gotta sit here and take my blood out of my body at home and everything. So like they had to calm me down and back me off the ledge and be like, nah, it's just like sugar water. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds simple. So like we scheduled time and whatnot, and like 2 months later during summer break, between my 8th grade and 9th grade year, I sit here and went and got the tube put in and started doing PD every night.
Okay. What about you, Amir?
That's how I got it there.
Gotcha. How about you, Amir? How did you decide PD was it for you?
For me, it was actually a pretty difficult decision. So, once my doctor started bringing up the whole discussion of dialysis and everything, I went into a ton of research. And the one thing that scared me the most was a CVC, the chest catheter. I did not want that. I did not want to go through a procedure awake. I did not want to have something sticking out of my chest directly connected to my heart. So immediately I was never going to accept a cath. Then I started looking at the difference between like the fistula and the graft, and I was like, okay, I really don't want my arm to look like they can look when you have the fistula, which it can look really nasty, but it can also look normal. I mean, as normal as can be. So I was like, okay, if I don't have to do that, I don't want to. And I am a bigger guy. I'm losing weight now, but at the time I was much bigger. And so I was like, I don't know if PD is an option for me. So I was like, I guess between the fistula or PD, if they won't let me do PD, I'll do a fistula. And I went to talk to my doctor. I was like, I know I'm fat, but can I do PD? And he's like, we've had great success with people yours. I was like, great, cool. So that sold me on it. Because PD was supposed to be the best way for me to live my life, which I disagree with now. But it also had nothing to do with getting a fistula, and I didn't have to have a chest catheter. So then I was like, okay, we'll do PD, and that was that.
Interesting. I think for me, honestly, after well, I honestly felt like I didn't really have a choice, to be honest. I don't remember ever being told a lot about PD. They just kind of like stuck me on hemo, and they were like, "Well, you're doing hemo, right?" But then again, I was super overweight back then, so they probably thought that was the only choice for me at the time. To be honest, once I lost more weight, that's when they offered PD, so it kind of makes sense. But honestly, I felt like hemo for me was the choice because, like I said, once I was on PD, I for sure knew that I didn't want to be at home and make my home like a clinic. I didn't want to deal with the ordering because you have to order your stuff. I didn't feel like doing any of those things, and also I didn't want to get peritonitis for the fourth fucking time. And I just felt like I was also lied to when I was gonna get onto PD because like I was telling them that I wanted to go back to work, I wanted to travel, I wanted to yada whatever, yada yada yada. And they were like, "Yeah, get on PD, and the whole world is yours. You'll be able to do whatever you want, you know." But in my experience, this is my personal, thing. When I first got on, they were like, "Oh yeah, you'll be on for like 8 hour sessions, 10 hours, right?" Well, those 10 hours turned to 12. So I was on for 12 hours a day, and then I was on 4 bags. I think it was 2 yellow and 2 greens. And then they ended up telling me that PD wasn't really working for me. It wasn't really filtering out like hemo was. So then they made me do a midday exchange. So then I was not only on the machine for 10 to 12 hours a day, but then I was also coming home by the afternoon and having to do a manual exchange. So literally PD was Monday through Sunday, and it was literally the only thing I did all day, I felt. And it just, I got tired of it. And I was like, once I got that last peritonitis, I was like, you know what? Take me the fuck off of PD. I'm going back to hemo. Hemo, I enjoyed, like I told y'all earlier. I just had to go to the clinic 3 times a week, get stuck, sit in a chair for 4 hours, 3.5 hours, done. Go home, eat, take a nap, enjoy my day off for the next day and the rest of my afternoon for that day that I had treatment. And that was it. Um, I also felt like I was able to challenge my weight because as I was losing more weight, they would also, you know, challenge my weight as in like make me lose a little bit more fluid every session to see what my new dry weight was. And that was cool seeing that also every week going down by kilos. Um, so I think hemo was cool for me for that whole reasoning. But then again, everybody's different. Amir and Nick had their experiences with PD and it worked fine for them. And, it makes me also think that if I was to give like advice to new people, I would tell them to like really think about what they want. Because I know some people don't like the aesthetics of hemo, having that big ugly fistula if it does get big. Now, not everybody's veins get big, like I said. Some people's
Mhm.
just have freaking freak veins like I did, and they literally just put a fistula in, and like by the second week, it got big by itself without it ever getting stuck, right? And also, depending on if it like, if you want to have like a social quote unquote life, I felt like hemo was, you know, that was like a little extra bonus for me because I was able to like get into my car, go to the clinic, talk to people, talk to nurses, and it made me feel like I wasn't just at home all the time. Like it gave me like a little sense that I was doing something, like I used to do. And with PD, I never felt like that. It was just being at home 24/7, basically.
I find that
But
incredibly intriguing
yeah,
because I had very different experiences.
yeah,
Absolute opposite, I would say.
yeah. And for
Because
me,
like,
like, well,
yeah.
go ahead.
Because like when I was on PD, I sit here and I was going to school for two
Yeah.
associate's degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was sort of after, well, getting on PD actually for a little while there. I was still doing classes. I was taking 4 classes a semester, and then I still did other activities. Like I built full size games for like the community college where I was going at the
Mm-hmm.
time. So like I built full size Twister, like for us to like have something to do outside during the summertime and stuff.
Yeah.
Giant Jenga and everything. I built all that from scratch.
Oh, cool.
I've done a lot of filming. I literally would set up my schedule around filming. And actually, I had a project I sit here and did one of my semesters at college, and I had to be off dialysis in the morning by 4 o'clock to sit here and be where I needed to be by 5:30, an hour, roughly about an hour away, to get breakfast and and get a couple other things ready so I could sit here and start filming with my crew at 8 o'clock that morning.
Mm-hmm.
To sit here and go all day long till 5. We ate dinner. Then I sit here and we did some more filming until 10. I didn't make it home till like 1 or 2 in the morning the next morning on Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Did dialysis, my PD dialysis session, and then literally unhooked for like a split second to go get dinner and then come right back and do it and then go back to school on Monday morning.
Jeez.
That was my entire weekend. Like
Yeah.
I will say it did not slow me down. I went on a vacation for like 2 whole weeks, 3 states away. It filled up an entire Tahoe with only 2 people and a whole bunch of stuff,
Yep.
but we made it happen. Is the thing. Like I felt like life ended when I hit hemo.
Really. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that could be interesting, like I mentioned. I guess it just.
I, I
I
didn't
guess it
I didn't let
depends.
it, but I did.
Yeah, I guess it just depends on the person. Like how you said you were going to college and doing all these things. Well, I wasn't. I was already 28. 29. I've already had my career, and I kind of felt like, hey, I don't have nothing else to do on PD. I don't have any kids. Wasn't in a relationship, so it just kind of felt like, well, this isn't satisfying my social battery. But
Hmm.
you know, I don't know. I guess it really just depends. Like I said, to each their own, right? But my biggest advice would be kind of like really think about it. Really think about what you expect to do in the future or like how long, Now, you can try both of them out too, like I did. You could stick to your to your chest catheter forever, however long you want before you get a fistula and then try out PD, and then if PD doesn't work, get back on hemo and then eventually get a fistula, or just stay with the chest catheter. But I'm sure your team at the clinic would, are going to always be telling you,
Gonna
hey,
harass you.
yeah, they're going to harass you about it, but you just ignore them, I guess, because a lot of people do that. They don't want to get stuck by those big old needles. But what about you, Amir? What type of advice would you give to people that are, trying to decide between hemo or PD?
My real advice is honestly going to be don't expect either one to let you keep your life the way it is now. Be ready to adjust so that way when you do have to adjust, it doesn't really hit you the same way it can if you're not ready for something. So, by that I mean, if you're working a physical job, don't let it kill you when you have to switch off of that. If you're constantly doing things that involve, like, let's say you do MMA training, which was something I was looking into at one point, you're going to have to stop. It's unfortunate, but prepare yourself for that. Don't let these things smack you in the face because at that time, when you're starting dialysis and you let these things hit you that hard, it's going to destroy your mental state if you're not prepared.
Yep, most definitely.
I
A
mean,
lot of people.
my biggest advice on this would literally be, and it's funny because this come from a when I was in pediatrics, it actually came from a fellow. So he wasn't part of the team, and he probably should have never told me this, but it came to me at 13 years old. And he come in the room. They were like, "Hey, we're gonna sit here and let this fellow sit here and like learn today. You know, he's gonna sit here and go through all your information with you." I go, "Okay, sounds good." Goes through all my information. He's like, "Wow, like kind of impressed. You know all this." He was like, "Let's go through medications right quick." And I go, "Okay." So I named off all my medications. He goes, "Oh, wow, like most patients don't know all their medication." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Now what do they do?" I'm like, "Oh, well, that's an interesting question." So I could get through like half of them. And he was like, "Oh, okay. Well, what about these other ones?" And I was like, "I don't know." He was, "Why not?" I don't know. I go, well, I do trust my pediatric team. And he goes, "Yeah, don't do that.
What?
As you get older, don't trust everything they say.
Yeah.
Do your own research, make your own choices. Your doctor is your teammate, not the person who decides everything that is good for you.
Yeah.
You know your body better than anything.
Be your own self advocate. And I think
Yeah,
that's like
be
the
your own
biggest
self
thing that I
advocate."
always tell people about this being on this journey is, be your own, self advocate. You know, don't always, take everything, you know, as they say. Do your own little research. Ask people, do all that stuff because at the end of it, it's your life. You're in control of it. You decide if you want to go to dialysis. You decide if you want to do treatments. You decide if you want to transplant. You decide if you want to be in hospice. All of that is your choice at the end of it. But
And it's gonna sit here and seem like they back you into a corner with every decision. Like
hmm
they're gonna make you think it's your decision, and it may not actually be your decision. Maybe you need to take a step back and think about it
no,
because not every decision they're gonna make is a good decision for
nope,
you.
nope. And I found out through the 6 years that I was on dialysis, the hard way. Because there's times now that I think back about it, I'm like, damn, if I would have just not did that, I would have been in, you know, perfect or in a better situation than I am now. For example, I ended up getting two fistulas, one on each arm because the left one was gonna be, getting too big, and then they started a new one, and then they were like, yeah, you need to start a new one. Transplant is probably like a year or two away. Uh, you know, we can't wait for you to, that long to get one. And I ended up getting a new one. Listen to them. I got the call the next following 3 months after I got the new fucking fistula for a transplant. So I was like, damn. It's like I should have just kept on using the other one. But I guess it's also a lot of the what ifs that really mess with me. So I guess I wasn't a man of chance. I was like, well, if they're telling me to do it, I'll do it. I didn't question them.
Yeah,
But that that makes you think a lot about things like that. But before we close the episode up for the week, is there anything you guys want to say before we say goodbyes?
When it comes to dialysis, no matter what you choose, it's keeping you alive either way. So try to appreciate it as much as you can, even though
Yep.
that's extremely hard. Because once you start to appreciate the thing keeping you alive, it makes it easier to deal with the rest of the things happening because of it.
True. Very true. What about you, Nick?
I would
Anything?
I would sit here and say, well, I listened to a song earlier today, and I think this is probably the best thing for the moment. Is sometimes you can find beauty in the horror.
Yep. True. It's so it's weird to think about it like that, but that's 100% true. But besides that, this was a very interesting episode. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening to it. And I want you guys to remember, dialysis may filter your blood, but it doesn't filter your voice. Remember to be yourself, your own self advocate, and take care of yourself. And until then, we'll see you guys in the next episode. So take it easy Enjoy your sessions at dialysis the best you can, and we'll see you guys later. Take care. Peace.
Bye.